We're going to start today with opening remarks from the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Ombud, Sunniva, Ørstavik.
My little sister's birthday. She'll remember me. For a gift, I had 10 of my boys take her virginity. These words are from a song written by a world-famous rapper. Moms and journalists were shocked, horrified, wanted the record stopped. Their sons and daughters merely shunned. They heard it before. They've seen it before. They had been surrounded by it for so long, they'd stop noticing. Is this hate speech? If you ask your kids, they'll tell you no. It's just a song, Mom. But for anybody working with or studying hate speech, the resemblance is striking. This is what hate speech sounds like. This is how women raising their voices are met, with threats of violence, with threats of rape, with words devaluing their sex, their body, their looks, every time they speak up in public. Is it illegal? No. It's not. Most of the time, it's not even close. Is it harmful? Of course it is. We know that hate speech promotes social exclusion and produces a chilling effect to participation. It scares people away. It weakens our democracy. We know that hate speech isn't just a symptom, it's a disease. One hateful comment will lead to more comments. Like a virus-driven cold, it will spread. We know that hate speech devalues women, not only in their own eyes, but also in the eyes of innocent bystanders. We know it produces fear, anxiety, and distress, and we know it can lead to violence and discrimination. And yet, what does our government do to prevent it? To protect the human rights of our women and girls? To reduce the harmful effects on our society? Shamefully close to nothing. When the topic of hate speech is discussed, the focus always gets directed to a debate on restrictions or no restrictions on the freedom of expression. This has blinded us to the social harms of hate speech and other types of measures that could be taken to counteract such harms. There are hundreds of things we can do without violating people's freedom of expression. For the last 2 years, I've been urging the government to come up with an action plan against hate speech, to order more research so we can get knowledge that we need, to adopt measures that really work, to strengthen the efforts in school so both teachers and students know what hate speech really is and how it affects the society and the people who live there. To raise awareness and strengthen civil society's work against hate speech so that our kids and we ourselves stop turning a blind eye and start doing something about the way our society sees and treats women and girls. For we are all responsible. The problem with hate speech cannot be solved if you look at it as a bad apple problem. if it reduces it to a problem of the angry man in the comment section, if you think it's all about the rapper and the text I started with, then we miss the point. Because our kids are right, that's just a song. It's the society he raps about that is our biggest problem. The hate speech itself is just a mirror. It cites the words that are already spoken in our community. It mirrors our own way of treating women as less important, less valuable, less human. It reflects, it does not invent. This is why I am so glad to see so many people here today. People willing to fight, people willing to make our government do something, and people ready to make a difference themselves. It's time to stop shrugging and start working, and I'm honored and privileged to do that work with you. Thank you.
Sunniva must unfortunately go to make an opening at another conference. Equality Ombud is in a very lucky position, but also not so lucky. Maybe we have two conferences going on the same day. So she will now go to the other conference to open about the rights of Roma. In 2013, the well-known Somali Norwegian woman activist Amal Alden, she was attacked on the street by two Somali women. Afterwards, the spokesman for an Islamic fundamentalist organization wrote on Facebook, "They should not have beaten her, they should have stoned her to death. For homosexuality shall be punishable by death." The spokesman was later prosecuted for criminal hate speech, but the trial court found that this incitement to violence was lawful speech. The case was appealed to an appellate court, and the appellate court found that there was not enough evidence to convict the spokesman. I don't know whether this case has now been appealed to the Norwegian Supreme Court, but regardless of whether this speech is found to be unlawful or lawful, the harm to society is significant, and it has already occurred. Somali women, homosexuals, lesbians have been told they risk violence, even death, if they choose to enter the public sphere. The threat is real, tangible, and it has been backed up by violence. This case, the Amal Alden case, this case illustrates very well why the Ombud has chosen the approach that we have to hate speech, to working against hate speech. First, we focus on the harms of hate speech, harms to individuals, harms to society. We don't focus so much on the border between lawful and unlawful hate speech. Both lawful and unlawful hate speech are causing great harm to society, and both need to be addressed. The Ombud's experience is the exact same experience so clearly expressed by the United Nations Committee on Racial Discrimination in its examination of Norway and Geneva 2 months ago, just 2 months ago. That experience is that every attempt to focus on hate speech and its harms and what we can do about it gets sidetracked, hijacked by an automatic gut reaction defense of freedom of expression. Some of you were there 2 months ago in Geneva. Some of you read about it the day after in the newspapers. But everybody in that room felt the tension and the drama of the final phase of the examination when a committee member put aside all formalities and chose to ask poignant, riveting, deep, riveting questions that went to the heart of the problem. He asked the Norwegian minister, Solveig Horne, what concrete measures are you taking to address hate speech? What concrete measures are you taking to address the hate speech of politicians? Because he said, this is the litmus test of how tolerant a society is, how they address hate speech by politicians. And he ended by saying, and please, please don't answer with talk about democratic values and freedom of expression. Because we are, of course, asking you what concrete measures you are taking within the confines of democracy, within the confines of freedom of expression. And freedom of expression does not mean doing nothing. This is a great obstacle to work against hate speech, that many believe, so many believe, that freedom of expression means doing nothing. We at the Ombud, we also focus on the multitude of grounds that motivate hate speech and the common elements which characterize all hate speech. In particular, we focus on the intersections of identities that motivate hate speech. Amal Aden was indeed the object of much hate speech even before she publicly declared herself to be a lesbian. However, the combination of her gender, her Somali ethnicity, and her sexual orientation seems to have produced a synergetic stimulus for hate speech. We focus here today on gender-based hate speech and its intersections. Tomorrow, we host a closed session with NGOs where we focus on hate speech motivated by racism and ethnicity, disability, religion, sexual orientation, as well as gender. This conference, it is an extended version of a successful seminar that we held at the United Nations Committee on Status of Women in New York in March of this year. With the collaboration and the support of the American Embassy in Norway, we have brought with us to Norway two of the American experts that were at that event in New York. And we are very grateful also to have two Norwegian experts who are doing pioneering research on the topic. Now, if I were to just give you a brief panoply or overview of where do we find gender-based hate speech, what does it look like? Then, of course, we're talking about text, we're talking about images. I would say that we are first talking about threats, sometimes combined with violence, and incitement to gender violence. This, of course, is the Amal Aden case. We find it in speech that celebrates gender violence. Celebrates gender violence. Those who post pictures on Facebook and other social media to celebrate the violence against women and girls. Good example of this, the singer Rihanna. When Rihanna was beaten by her boyfriend, these pictures were very often posted on Facebook in order to celebrate the beating of her. Jamia Wilson will talk to us about Jamia Wilson, the executive director of the organization Women, Action, and the Media. We're very thankful to have you here with us in Oslo. She will basically be talking a lot about how one can, as activists, go forward in addressing and trying to do something about this kind of hate speech in the social media. Where else do we find it? We find gender-based hate speech in sexual harassment and gender harassment on the net, in online games, in music industry. We're very fortunate to have Christina Ask, professor at NTNU in Trondheim. She will share with us her research on gender hate speech in online gaming. We're very fortunate to also have Aine Landsverk Hagen, researcher at the Work Research Institute, what we here in Norway call AFI, or Arbeidsforskningsinstitut, connected to Oslo and Akershus University College. She will be sharing her research on the directed at journalists and bloggers, resulting in the book Mening is Moed, Net Hat og Ytringsfrihet in Norge. Actually, I brought it with me. I forgot to bring it up here. I was going to show you the book. In English, I suppose we would translate that title to The Courage of Opinions, Online Hate and Freedom of Expression in Norway. Thank you for coming, Anne. And Christine. Where else do we find gender-based hate speech? We find it in images that glorify the sexual denigration of women in pornography. Very good example of this are the pornographic images of what is known as gagging. We find it in the morality policing, hierarchy policing, speech that demands conformance to certain behavior because you are a woman, because you are a girl. We find it in the stigmatization of specific groups of women, such as pregnant teenagers, single mothers. We find in sexist rhetoric based on prejudice and stereotype. And indeed, it is prejudice and stereotype which is in reality underlining all of the aspects of gender-based hate speech. It is part of the very root causes of hate speech. And we are so fortunate to have Dr. John Schuford, founder of Hate Studies Policy Research Center and faculty member at Portland State University and Royal Roads University. And here it will be John that will start off talking about what is hate speech. But finally, I'd like to ask, or what is hate? Finally, I'd like to thank the United States Embassy in Norway for its collaboration and for its support in actually helping to make this conference a reality. We start with John. Thank you.